The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at www.mtsu.edu/CEM.
Welcome to Middle Tennessee State University today. This is the School Counselors Collaborative Summer Academy, and it is our first one on site. We are in the end of our second year in the School Counselors Collaborative here at MTSU, and it's part of a larger initiative called the PK-12 Collaborative. In 2017, we started working with teachers of English learners, and we used the same model we're doing here, and so we've been having professional development practice-based with teachers of English learners since 2017. In 2019, we started meeting and planning the School Counselors Collaborative because we kept hearing school counselors say, we need some help. And so we decided, let's do a similar initiative, a similar model using practice-based approach for school counselors. We're also in our third year of the SPED Collaborative, using the same model. And so we invite special educators to come, and we're actually having a summer academy next week. I want you to know that we invite ideas for topics. We invite suggestions for good practitioners. And we will give you an opportunity today in feedback to give us some of those ideas. A key person in the work here at MTSU that I'd like to introduce is Dr. Tiffany Wilson. Would you join me over here? Dr. Wilson is a professor in the school counseling program, and she directs the school counseling program here at MTSU. And she is our faculty liaison. She is who's connecting us to the community of school counselors. Dr. Wilson, would you like to say anything before we wrap it up here?
Thank you so much for being here today. It's good to meet some faces I've seen in little boxes on Zoom, so it's nice to see y'all in person. And we just appreciate y'all being here and look forward to collaborating with you in future trainings and things like that. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Dr. Wilson has connected you because she knows you through her work in placing school counselors in schools, but we also have some counseling students here today, and I'm really happy about that. So today we have 4 sessions that we believe will be of interest to you, and with practitioners that have come to us recommended because of their good practice. We have another session today and across all of our collaboratives that we have named the Cross Collaborative. And that's where we pull in practitioners from various domains, and today it will be from English learners and school counseling. And they talk about what does it look like, what does the intersection of their work look like? If a school counselor is serving an English learner, what does that look like? Or if a teacher of English learner is serving a child who needs some mental health support, what does that look like? And so that will be a conversation that we have this afternoon. And this cross-collaborative initiative, again, is a request by teachers and counselors to say, how do we work with our colleagues? And so, you know, the reason we've identified these particular 3 domains is because practitioners in these areas sometimes tend to be kind of alone. In some small districts particularly, they may be the only one in the school or the only one in the district. And so we are building this collaborative to give you another community to share your practice and to support each other. That's what the collaborative is about. Practice-based, practitioner-oriented, and we try to be responsive to your requests. So we welcome you here today, and I would like to now introduce our first presenter, Dr. Joe Gordon. Dr. Gordon is with Metro Nashville Public Schools. He's presenting today on a compelling topic and about how we support LGBTQ children in our schools. And he comes to us highly recommended, and so I'm setting the bar high, Dr. Gordon. So welcome, and would you please take the podium? Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Let's see. All right, the most important part of a presentation is finding the clicker and making sure that you know how it works. I'm excited to be here. I thank Dr. Clark and Dr. Wilson for inviting me to speak with you today. Just a little bit about me. I started in school counseling. If you've been around long enough, as long as I have, you forget how many years it is, but it's in that 17, 18 range where you finally have to realize you're not the young one in the profession anymore. You're kind of the seasoned, grizzled veteran. But I do want to start off with saying, by no means am I an expert in this topic. I'm not an expert in this category. I was hoping to have my partner that works in our counseling services department with the specific grant that I'm going to be sharing with you that has funded and driven a lot of work that we're doing. So she can talk a lot more specifically about the opportunities and the systems that we have set up within our district. But she, as every this time of year is busy and people get pulled into training, so she is at one of our schools doing training on this very work today. So I will do my best to do justice to this topic. I think it's important when you talk about a subject like supporting LGBTQ plus students that every school district in every part of our country is in a different space in how we handle and how we support students that fall into this category. It's a politicized issue, right, wrong, or indifferent. As school counselors, we are oftentimes tasked because of our ethical and moral obligations that put us at a higher level given our profession. Sometimes we have to find that balance between what we know that we have to do as school counselors and what our district says that we can and cannot talk about as educators in our district. I just want to honor the fact that this is not a simple topic to talk about, but my personal belief and my guiding through line with everything that I have done as an educator from the beginning, as a middle school counselor at DuPont Hadley Middle School in Davidson County in the north of town for 10 and a half years, and my support at the district level as a coordinator of school counseling for the last 7-8 years. Like I said, it all blurs at some point, is are we doing what is right for children? That should be the cornerstone, or that's what I feel should be the cornerstone of any educator's philosophy, is are we doing what's right for students? And so knowing that our students who identify as LGBTQ plus are some of our students who need a significant amount of support in our schools, I feel that it's our obligation as educators to provide that support. So I'm going to go through some slides, and like I said, this presentation was crafted by my partner, Catherine Sacrapani, who couldn't be here today. So I'm going to go through some information and some slides and kind of give you the context of what we've been doing over the last couple of years in our school district to support our students. And then for me, I feel like the best part of any presentation or any opportunity to talk about to go over subjects is to talk and ask questions. This is all a journey for all of us, and each of us are starting at different places. And so I feel like that's honestly always the most fruitful part of any presentation. But let's get started. So a lot of the data that I'm going to be talking about today is drawn from the Youth Behavior Risk Survey that we have been implementing as part of our work through the CDC grant that we have. A couple of years ago, as a part of an initiative, we were able to win a grant through the CDC. And ultimately, the foundational aspects of that grant were to increase sexual health education within our schools, access to sexual health services, and what I feel is the most key element in this conversation is increasing and providing safe and supportive environments for students in our buildings. So talking a little bit about the data that we have. Overall, in our schools, when this was conducted, I believe this was 2019, you do our YRBS every odd year, so we are just now receiving the 2021 data, so know that this data is a little out of date, but still fairly recent. I don't know if your schools are similar to the schools in my district, but we had a high number of students who are contemplating or attempting suicide, and COVID unfortunately has exacerbated that, and our number of suicide screeners over the last 2 years have increased, and I hesitate to say exponentially, but that's not too far afield of the truth. In looking at the data, students' emotional health and the number of our students who need that support is continuing to rise. So that's why the work of our school counselors, school social workers, school psychologists, any mental health service provider that we can pull into schools is incredibly important. This slide specifically, if you can read it, one of the pieces that we wanted to do as a part of the grant is to include questions in the YRBS survey to help us delineate the data based on students as a whole, but more specifically in providing us data for our LGBTQ plus students. So the first statement, so this is one of the questions in the survey. Did you feel sad or hopeless for greater than 2 weeks in a row during the past 12 months? In comparison to the heterosexual peers, 32.9% said yes, and in comparison, students that identified as LGBTQ plus, 67% of those students. The next question, seriously considered attempting suicide during the past 12 months. That's 13% in comparison to 44%. Made a plan to commit suicide in the past 12 months, 15% versus 40%. Attempted suicide once or more during the past 12 months, 8% in comparison to 34.5%. And then 48% of heterosexual students in comparison to 60% of LGBTQ plus students said that they didn't feel that they mattered to people in their community. So what does this data tell us? That there is a significant need for support for our students who identify as LGBTQ plus. All right. Safe and supportive environment. Like I said, that's one of the cornerstones of the grant that we were awarded to help us create systems and services for our students. So the first category, 48.2% overall feel like they matter to people in the community. Heterosexual students, 51% versus 40 and 36% of our LGBTQ and unsure students. And then 58% feel safe and secure at school, 60% versus 49 and 51. As school counselors, we should want our students to feel comfortable in our buildings. We need them to be in the schools so that we can educate them. This is for those of us who are needing to find that through line into what matters for stakeholders who are unsure of how, why, and can we provide supports for students. Sometimes it's a matter of finding that piece of information that matters. So in the survey, percentage of high school students who didn't go to school because they felt unsafe was 13.8% overall. But our LGBTQ students were 3 times more likely to miss school in comparison to their heterosexual peers, okay? I don't know if y'all are under the same, well, I know that you're under the same burden when it comes to attendance in all school districts across the state of Tennessee. Attendance matters, right? That's one of those key metrics that we get judged by. If we don't create environments where our students feel safe and secure coming to, it's going to impact our attendance. And from attendance, it impacts academics and achievement. So it behooves us as educators, as professionals, to find ways to ensure that all of our students feel welcomed, feel like they matter, so that they want to come to school and be a part of the environment there. Specific information from the 2019 survey, 48% of LGBTQ plus students didn't go to school at least one day, right? And as you know, one day doesn't seem like a lot, but that can be a compounding factor for a lot of different things in the school. One day can lead to 2, can lead to 3. 51% rarely or never felt safe at school. When you think about that, half of students in a specific population don't feel safe in their school. That should be all that we need to know to ensure that we need to provide services and to make sure that our students feel welcomed and supported. 3 times more likely to be cyberbullied, 30% more likely to be bullied on property. Our LGBTQ plus students are a protected class based on state and federal law. There are news stories that have come out recently of school districts being sued because they did not protect students in a protected class, specifically students that identify in this category. It's not just what's right, it's what is required by law. So ensuring that we have systems in place to support students is critical. So that's the data. What have we been doing? All right, we're going to go, the next couple of slides are about the systems that have been put into place. Some of these are not school counselor specific. Some of these are just global and universal. And universal things that we've done, they're not solely designed for LGBTQ plus students. What we are doing for them is good for all, right? So we've established gender and sexuality alliances at each of our comprehensive high schools and are expanding into middle schools. One thing that I will say is sometimes people, when you use words like gender and you use words like sexuality, people get hung up on them. They're support groups for students. They're lunch bunches for students. They're after-school clubs that are sponsored by faculty members and run by caring individuals who want to be supportive of students. We don't always have to put the specific label on it because sometimes we have to be practical, we have to be pragmatic given the climate and the culture of where we work. But again, it's what's right for students. Providing staff with trainings to better understand how to support youth in this category. These aren't mandatory trainings necessarily, but we have had hundreds and hundreds of educators, teachers, school counselors, school social workers, school psychologists that have voluntarily come to these trainings that are provided by some of our community partners so that they can learn how best to support these students, how to walk with their students side by side through, let's be honest, as a middle school counselor, that's a tough time. As a high school student, that's a tough time in general for all students. Elementary is becoming tougher and tougher. Ensuring that we are equipped to be able to walk with these students who are going through things that we may not personally understand, but to know and learn from them and just to have that empathy for them, to be that person that they can come to is incredibly important. We've provided trainings to our principals using APA's respect training to ensure that our administrators understand how do you create an environment within your school building that is supportive of LGBTQ students. From an educational standpoint, we're providing, implementing sexual health education, providing supplemental resources in our wellness classes. The content is not specifically driven in talking about LGBTQ students, but it's talking about increasing sexual health education because the main component of that grant is working to reduce the rates of sexually transmitted diseases amongst students. And if you look at the data, our LGBTQ students are much more likely to have a sexually transmitted disease in comparison to their peers. We have sent GSA members and sponsors to leadership training. And we have also the Nashville Pride Parade that's been going on for the last several years. I think last year, because of COVID, it was delayed until the fall, but in the last 2 to 3 years, we have had a contingent of educators and students participate in our Nashville Pride Parade. Many of those are our GSA students and sponsors, but educators all across the district are part of that. We've worked to increase family engagement within the community to support our LGBTQ youth. And then within our district, we have what we call our collaborative referral system. It is our standard referral across the district for to identify needs for students. It could be mental health needs, it could be subsistence needs, it could be academic needs, but specifically on there, we have added categories identifying students who need help gaining access to sexual health services. This goes through kind of a comparison of the why and why we are doing certain things in our district and the how. So these are the data points from the YRBS survey and our response. So 13.7% have experienced sexual violence, 38% felt sad or hopeless, 18% committed or attempted suicide, or considered or attempted suicide, and each of these categories is higher amongst this population. So we implemented Health Smart's mental health and emotional health module within our wellness courses. Again, we revised our referral system, created a community health resource guide. So this covers the gamut of all the different resources that are available in our community, so that it's at the fingertips of our students and our parents. If you're like me, when I first came in, trying to identify the resources within our community could be very, very difficult. But because of this, it's broken down by the category, it's broken down by the need. It's a really wonderful resource that we have. Continuing to work with our community partner at the Oasis Center and providing the training, and then, like I said, the training for the administrators as well. Other data pieces and our response, 26% of our students are currently sexually active, 44% use a condom during their sexual intercourse, 24% didn't use any method of protection. And this last bullet comes from the Davidson County Health Department, which stated 45% of chlamydia cases are among students 15 to 19. And in the U.S., 20% of the chlamydia cases are among ages 15 to 19. And each year, HIV cases are higher in Davidson County than in the U.S. Ensuring that our students have access to appropriate sexual health education is critical. And because of the higher rates of transmission amongst our LGBTQ plus students, it's imperative that we provide this to our students. We implemented curriculum, resource guides, lots of different supports to combat these statistics. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about kind of the culture and climate of our school district as a whole. I'm lucky that we had a Board of Education in a school district who felt it was right and appropriate to pass a resolution. Back in April of 21, we passed a resolution, but ultimately we created the resolution, MMPS is for all students. The resolution stated that all students, regardless of sexual identity, regardless of gender identity, gender expression, sexual orientation, have the right to access a free and appropriate public education. We also stated and recognized the fact that we want to support our educators who identify as LGBTQ+, and we want to support our families within this community as well. As I said, as a part of that, we've been participating in the Nashville Pride Parade. We also, in conjunction with the Oasis Center, have what we call our gender support plan. For our students who identify as transgender, navigating school can be incredibly difficult. And the creation of this plan and this system is something that took place over a year or two, working with our community partners, working with our legal department to ensure that we are creating a system that follows all Tennessee laws and to make sure that we are also supporting those students. So our gender support plans are a way for us to work collaboratively with students and families of students who identify as transgender and determining what levels of support they need. For students younger than 16, we do require parental consent before we create and implement a gender support plan. I don't want you to think, though, that this is a long and arduous process. As with anything in supporting students, oftentimes the best course of action is to let the student and family guide the conversation. We don't want to assume that they need something that they don't need. For many of our students, especially during the pandemic, it was ensuring that when students are in virtual classes that their preferred name shows up on Zoom or Teams as opposed to the name assigned at birth. It can be access to bathrooms, but it doesn't have to be. Okay? It's only what the student needs. We don't want to make an assumption on what a child needs. Have them guide the conversation along with their parents. In certain circumstances, students 16 or above, because of the legality of children 16 and above being able to consent to medical treatment, and in certain circumstances, we do create gender support plans for students without the parent consent, but I would say that that's very rarely the case. More often than not, parents are involved in the process. Unfortunately, there are situations, especially for our younger students, where parents are not in a place where they're able to participate in that conversation. They're not willing to participate in that conversation. I think it's important that we provide grace and understanding for those parents as well as supporting their students. This is a difficult journey for all stakeholders involved. It can be a difficult journey. That's why we, as the mental health service providers in the schools, we need to come at this with caring and compassion. And it doesn't mean that the door is closed forever. It's just we have to work and support our students however the best we can. As I mentioned, we have expanded and are continuing to support our GSAs and other support groups for these students. And then finally, as a result of COVID, the CDC grant that we were awarded did expand and provide an extra pool of money to increase mental health services. So because of that, we were able to provide 3.5 grant-funded school social workers, and those have been pushed into schools with our highest number of suicide screeners, rates of students identifying with anxiety and depression. And because our students who identify as LGBTQ are comorbid for these, we feel like we are helping to support those students in those buildings through the addition of other mental health services. That's kind of been our journey in Metro schools. I know that journey isn't going to be the same in every school system, but ultimately, we wanted to do what was right for students, and we feel that we are taking steps each and every day, getting better each and every day in supporting our students. And so I know that my session in time is a little longer than this, But like I said before, I feel like the conversation is the most important part of any training. So I'm going to open it up to y'all to ask any questions, or those of you who have thoughts, questions, or concerns. Yes, sir.
The survey that you all sent out in 2019, where did you obtain that survey?
Yeah, the YRBS survey, it's a national survey. I would have to talk to my partner, Catherine, about where that comes from. It's a national survey. It's given all across the country. It's schools and districts have to agree to participate in that. It's an anonymous survey, and it's not every single student in the district. It's a random sampling, but it's a representative sampling of the students in our school district. So the data that we have here is specifically for Davidson County for Metro Nashville Public Schools, but there are data sets that include these categories across the entire country and in different regions. So that would be how to participate in that survey would be something that I would have to research.
What's it called again?
The Youth Risk Behavior Survey, YRBS for short.
So you had mentioned that y'all do gender support plans for 16 and older without parent permission, but for your younger students, how do you support those students that they're expressing to their teachers and their school counselors and even their principals that they want to be called a different name, that they want to use a different bathroom, but they do not want you to talk to their parent?
That's one of those, as school counselors, we have to be comfortable with the gray, as uncomfortable as that can be. There's no one answer for every single situation. For me, I think we have to be honest with our students. Our students are more resilient and they're more perceptive than we oftentimes will give them credit for. So I think having that honest conversation, like with a student, in my office, when I am working with you, I am going to refer to you as your preferred name, your preferred pronouns. We may not be able to do that in all areas of our building, and that's unfortunate. But know that there are individuals in our building, there are teachers, there are administrators, there are counselors and social workers who love and support you. Right now, you may not be able to fully express who you are, and through the how you want to identify the name that you want to use, but know that you have people who understand and care for you, and we understand this incredibly difficult time, but there will be a time, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel where you will have the space and the autonomy to express yourself in the way that you feel is most authentic to you. We just got to be honest with students, and as much as we would like to wave that magic solution-focused wand and make everything better tomorrow, it's a journey, and just letting them know that you're going to be here with them as much as you can every step of the way.
I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the gender support plans.
Right.
Are they like formalized written plans, or is it more a guided conversation?
So the process to complete is a guided conversation. It's a document. It is an official Metro Nashville Public Schools document. It's not as legally binding as say an IEP or anything like that. It is definitely not a document that is housed in the student record. It is not a part of the student record. But how the process works is whether it is a parent or whether it is a student who comes to an educator, whether it be the teacher or the school counselor, it's a process that the administrator and the school counselor work together with that student and that family. The first question that I always ask, well, where are your parents at this part of this conversation? Are your parents aware? Are they supportive? Sometimes we have to get through those steps and encourage our students to have those tough and courageous conversations with their parents, whether they do it on their own or whether they do it in conjunction with you. Having that conversation and letting their parents know, this is tough, but this is who I am. This is how I feel. I will say more often than not, our parents are more scared than our students, because our students have been sitting with it for a lot longer than their parents have, right? So once we get the parents in the room, the document itself, it walks you through guided conversations and questions, right? And that when I say that it should be guided by the student with the support of their parents, they're the ones that are going to let you know what you need. So that document is something that the reason that the administrator is there is they can help with some of the more practical aspects of it. Access to specific restrooms, logistical planning, right? When it comes to the technical aspect of changing the student's email address to reflect the preferred name, or changing the name that pops up when they may or may not be virtual, that's sent to us at the district level, and we have a wonderful IT team that works and tries to get that turned around in 24 to 48 hours. So it is a structured process, but it's not as formal as an IEP meeting or a 504 meeting. We're having a conversation. We're figuring this out together. We're walking together as a team. Great question.
So you mentioned like outside community resources and like a guide to what is available. Do you have like all of those in one location? Are they provided to all school counselors? Is your social worker, are they over that to provide those to those families? And if so, could you share?
I will say that I was not intimately involved in the construction and creation of it, but it lives in a lot of different places in our district. Most specifically, you can find it under the school counseling section of our district website, and links there, but there is a PDF document of that. And so if that's, if nothing else to show you what it could look like, I can work with Dr. Clark to perhaps provide links or access to that. I just need to double check to make sure that's something that's available to share outside of our district, but it's something that we can definitely try to do.
And let me say to everyone, any documents that you see today will be available on our website for you to access later. PowerPoints, anything like that. So that will be available for you, so we can work with you on that.
Yeah, so if someone from Dr. Wilson's team can make a note to help me remember when I get back to the office, I will make sure that I go through the right channels to share that, but I'd be more than happy to.
You mentioned the Gender Sexuality Alliance, and you said that sometimes that may look like a lunch bunch or an after-school type program. So what does the after-school look like? The lunch bunch, I can see it's being kind of laid back. Everybody's eating and talking and such. But then after school, is there more of a focus group time, or what does that look like exactly?
So I know that this is where I wish that my partner Catherine was here. She could talk more specifically about the structure and what those look like. During the school day, yes, like typically how we as school counselors get access and do small groups, it's going to look similar to that, right? Or it may be that it's just like-minded students coming together. After school, the more structured and the ones that the GSAs, they have the sponsor and student leaders get training. That's part of their. They provide training to be able to know how to create, run, and support an effective GSA. So that would be, and so there is a structure, I'm sure, but it may look a little bit different based on the specific needs of the school.
I was just hoping that you could potentially also share your gender support plan template when you're potentially sharing documents or something similar.
I will double check to see if that is something that we can do. But if nothing else, I'll figure something out. We will figure it out. But yes, definitely. If nothing else, I can provide some of the guiding questions that we use, right? Even if it's not the official form. But yeah, we can figure something out.
Hi, I just wanted to let you all know that I started a GSA last year at my school. And honestly, I was very nervous about the outcome, but my principal was very, very supportive. One thing a roadblock that I ran into as students was like, I don't know what to tell my parents about this club. So this year I'm going to change it a little bit, and it's called, and I actually got it from you all, it's The Creek Loves All. And I'm going to use Stephen Covey's effective habits of teens curriculum, and I'm going to teach them those. That's how I'm going to kind of structure the GSA and our clubs. That way parents can't say I'm teaching their kids how to be gay or whatnot. So I wanted to express that to you all. That's what I'm trying to do this year.
Sometimes we have to be savvy in how we package something, right? Just for the same reasons that we wouldn't send a letter home to parents saying, well, your child has been invited to an anger management group. No, we're inviting your student to a student success group, right? We have to be mindful of the language, because the language can be that first barrier that turns someone's ears, mind, and heart off. So I think that's an incredible way of ensuring that you're providing supports to your students.
Daryl, thank you for sharing a success that you've had. I'd like to expand on that a little bit since we have some extra time right now. And I would like to hear other success stories from your schools and your districts. Can you think of some time with, of course, maintaining confidentiality of students, but can you think of some successes that you've had that you can share with the room now? And our microphones will come to you when you have a story to share.
I'll share one from my experience from the central office level to kind of prime the pump. Several years ago, I was called in to support a school counselor who was working with a family of an elementary student. The student was 4th grade, so it was at the beginning of the 4th grade year, but there was already the trepidation of moving into 5th grade. This is a student who was born female, who identified as male, had gone through incredibly supportive parents, official legal name change, so all official documents have the preferred name. Student physically identified as male. So this is a student that at his original school was bullied and victimized because of his gender expression. And had moved to this school to be in a more safe and supportive environment. And going into the meeting, the parents were just, what can we do to support the child? The relief on their face when I explained the fact that we have a gender support plan for students that we can create to identify and codify what your child needs. Like, the relief on the parent's face was, it's something I won't forget. And their knowledge, like, once this plan is in place, we will pass it from school counselor to school counselor and administrator to administrator so that there is a seamless transition plan. We can make sure that when your child steps into school as a 5th grader, a plan is in place. That child looks and identified as a boy, and that is who he was walking into middle school. And for them to have that amount of relief to remove that anxiety was great to be a part of. I was just a very small part of it. The school had done all the legwork. They had already provided the safe environment. They just needed something to kind of put it on paper so that everybody could be on the same page.
So I want to share, I have several friends back home. I was a school counselor in North Carolina, and so I have friends that are school counselors. One of the things that one of my friends did, she was able to get other parents together to support each other, because I think it's the isolation feeling as well for parents, and I thought that was such a phenomenal idea to help bring parents together who are interested in meeting other parents who may be going through the same journey, to know that they're not alone. And I think that was such a powerful strategy to help build a community within the school. And I'm curious to know, how did you talk to your principal to get them on board in administration? Because that's often a barrier. I want to hear how you proposed the idea.
So I went up to her and I said, because in sixth grade, I had sixth grade the year before. And I noticed a lot of sixth graders coming to my office and coming out to me or trans, and I'm like, whoa, there's more to it. There's more than I thought. We switched principals, so I got a new principal the last school year. And I went up to her and I said, this is what I experienced last year. I feel like we need to implement something in the school to have support. And she didn't even hesitate. And she was like, absolutely, if we can have an FSA club or the Christian Athletes Club, then we can have that as well. And I'm not backing down. So she was very supportive, very.
I think you bring up a very important point. We may have an erroneous belief that there's not as many students who identify in this population in our schools than we actually do. Just because they haven't come out or they're not outwardly identifying, they are living with that inside, even if they haven't shared it, even if they aren't open about it. You have students in your schools who identify as LGBTQ+, so even if they're not participating in the GSA, knowing that that there are supports and individuals and adults in the building who are supportive, knowing that can also be a relief for those students. So when they are ready, they know there are individuals that they can go to. So that's wonderful.
You said that you have training for your administration throughout the whole district, and that's available for teachers as well?
The training is different for the different targeted audiences for sure. But yes, our administrators as a part of this grant all of them did get trained on the respect training that was most specifically on how as an administrator can I help to foster a safe and supportive environment in my building. The other educators got the training on how to support students. And then that was kind of the first level of training. And then if they wanted to, they could go to a more in-depth training on that got a little bit more in depth. I think it's called Beyond Pronouns. So it's beyond just using the right language. This is how we can embody supporting students that fall into this category. So yes, it was provided to all of our administrators, and it was provided optionally to our teachers.
Do you all have implicit bias training in your district?
We do, yes.
Is that required? I just was recently made aware that it's a state law, and I was wondering, is every teacher required to do that?
I know that this summer all of our certificated employees were required to go to a diversity, equity, and inclusion training, and implicit bias is a huge part of that. There have been for the last several years implicit bias trainings throughout our district. Principals oftentimes would either request that training to be pulled in, or based on certain data points that identify that this school might be a good candidate to receive that training, those trainings have been pushed in. So yes, that is a part of our professional development in the district.
We have a question from live stream.
Ooh.
How do you work with other students to help them understand and support the LGBTQ students?
I think just as we need to be caring and understanding of parents who may not be at the right place to be able to accept or support their students in the way that they need, we have to be supportive of those students who don't understand. I often find it's interesting. I often find that the younger the student is, the less of an issue that it is. Oh, you're identifying as a boy now? Okay. It's the older students that are oftentimes more rigid in their thinking. This is not evidence-based practice, but this is the practice that worked for me as a school counselor. When I came across situations that there's a need for the caring and understanding of a school counselor, but there's also needs to be, forgive the expression, the 1-2 punch of the reality of the the situation from an administrative point of view. Letting the student know that I get it. It may be confusing for you. You may be hearing differing perspectives at home, but while you're in this building, we are going to provide a safe environment for all students. We're not going to allow any student to be victimized, to be harassed, or to be bullied. And I'm here to help you think through that, but I want you to know and understand that we're going to protect and respect all students. My favorite phrase was, you don't have to be friends with everybody, but you have to be able to provide enough respect to leave someone alone. And then luckily my administrator would come in with a little bit of a heavier conversation of, if the behavior continues, if you continue to harass or bully a student, these are the potential consequences that you will be facing. We don't want to have to do that. We want to be able to live and work together. We want you in our school. We want you in the classrooms, but these are things that you cannot do. So for myself as a school counselor, that's how I handled many situations. That's probably how I would handle a situation involving a student who is struggling with understanding and accepting other classmates who identify in this category. You know, you got to walk with everybody, and you got to meet with all students where they're at. And it's, you know, you have to understand that everybody's coming from different backgrounds with different things that they're coming in from home, but understanding that while we're in this building, this is how we're going to treat each other, and this is how we're going to behave, and these are the potential consequences if we don't. It's the same thing for life and reality outside of the school as well.
And
Great question,
I'd like to follow with another question from live
Sure.
stream, and this is from an elementary school counselor.
Yes, ma'am.
Is this also geared for resources for elementary school? There's a lot of pushback at the elementary level. What would be a good starting point at my level, elementary, with teachers, admin, and parents?
Especially with our younger students, paying attention to the news, that's where a lot of the politicized conversation about it comes from. I think that similarly to our friend back here who started the GSA and is focusing the content around the habits of highly effective teens, right? We can do lessons about respecting differences, understanding differences. I think it's important to begin the conversation and being caring and understanding and letting adults know that this isn't something that happens overnight. I don't turn 16 and now I'm identifying as a transgender student. This is something that child has more than likely been going through for many, many years. And as I said, the number of students that we have identifying, the specific example that I gave of working with the elementary student who identified as transgendered, we have more and more students at the elementary level identifying as transgender every single day. We have more and more students identifying in the LGBTQ category, population across all tier levels. You do have to be mindful and nuanced in how you present and how you support, given where you're at. I just happen to be lucky to work in a school district where this is a part of the culture and climate within our district. And that's why I said at the very beginning, we're not all going to be in schools or school systems where this is ingrained in the culture. It's about starting slow, finding the wins where you can, and building upon those wins. So unfortunately, I don't have a perfect answer for that, but there is a way to do it. And I think it's providing that content and that curriculum that is good for all, but most specifically good for this population of students and necessary for this population of students.
As an elementary counselor myself, one thing that I have had to work with over the past year or so is, a student that is identifying differently than what's expected. And the tendency for teachers to separate students for different activities, boy, girl. And
thank you for that.
One thing that I encouraged the like special area teachers to do if they were going to do something like that is, you know, because pretty much all the classes have numbers for the kids. Numbers 1 through 10 this side, numbers 11 through 20 this side, and get away from the boy-girl separation because, you know, it doesn't help.
Absolutely, and thank you for bringing that example up. Yes, that is something, a conversation that you can have with your educators, right? Just being mindful of using gender we grew up with that, right? But breaking ourselves of that habit. A friend that was a former teacher that worked with my wife, who's an 8th grade science teacher, they're beginning to talk about genetics. They're talking about genetic differences. So it was a corners activity, and the first question was, all right, separate by male and female. He didn't realize that he had a transgender student in his classroom. He assumed that this individual was born male, but he had no clue. And for him, after the fact, to learn that he had made that child feel uncomfortable, he was mortified. So having those proactive conversations, just thinking, just having it in your mind. And one of the most wonderful things that I learn about in working with students and hearing stories about students, as long as you are making an effort to support them, even if you make a mistake, you call them by their birth name or you use the wrong pronoun. As long as they know where your heart is as an individual and where your heart is as an educator, they are going to be willing to provide that grace and understanding. And as long as we consistently try to be a little bit better each day. So that's a wonderful example.
And let me bring another question here. We've heard how MNPS approaches it, and with a wealth of community resources in Nashville. And we have many school districts in Tennessee who do not have a similar set of community resources. So, and often the school is one of the centered resources in the community. How do you advise counselors, and what do you advise them to do in districts with limited community resources?
Like I said, you know, I'm not the expert. Unfortunately, my experience has only been in Metro Nashville Public Schools.
So we might give it to the group.
Yeah. However, within the school that I worked at, it was an odd mixture of affluent and rural, and many of our students moved further out of the center of the city from more of the inner city. And so it was an odd amalgamation of students, but it was a rural school. So in that specific area, we didn't have the same resources that some schools might have just right down the block. So I think it's trying to find those like-minded partners as best you can. Oftentimes it's partnering with the community center that students go to after school, partnering with the YMCA, partnering with any and every organization that wants to be a part of it, and having those conversations. We have a population of students who I hate to use the word at risk, so the underserved students. Are there things that we can bring into our school to create an environment where they feel supported and provide those resources? So it's all about building partnerships and trying to find, and it may not be, a specific organization. It might be an individual. It might be a private practitioner that you can refer students to, right? It might be a church who has a supportive after-school opportunity for students. We have to be creative, right? We didn't go into this field to get rich, and we know that the pockets of our school districts are not always as deep as we like to be, and even if they are deep, that money doesn't always trickle down to us as school counselors. So it's about creative and finding those individuals that are willing to work with you. I know that's not the best answer. I know it's not what we want to hear, but it's just about keeping your eyes and ears open for those opportunities.
One thing I would say too is looking at national organizations, that have local presence. I used to use PFLAG all the time and found representatives in the community that I didn't know existed just by looking at national organizations. So I think that's another way to figure out who may be allies in the area. Yeah.
That's one. Yeah, they may know more about what's available in your area than you are. So yeah, it's a great place to start.
So I just left ASCA last weekend, and I always leave conferences like this and like that very empowered and, you know, with a lot of energy. And then I get back at my desk and the emails are there and the parents and the scheduling changes. And so my question is, with knowing what we do in the state and the transcript entry and all of those things that we have to do that are basically outside our scope of ASCA, what we are told we should be doing, how do you find time and how do you choose of the long list of advocacy that we need to do for our students, how do we pick and choose what we have time for within our framework and our time within the workday, if that makes sense?
We are never going to be able to work at the capacity that our hearts and minds would like us to do. And that's where we as professionals oftentimes need to provide ourselves grace and understanding. The school day may be 8 to 3, but school counseling is not an 8 to 3 job. But we also have to have a life. We also have to make sure that we take care of ourselves. I would say, though, that there are opportunities for those conversations, even when I'm doing a senior transcript review. The social emotional falls out of the mundane all the time when we're having those conversations. The stress of thinking about going to college, allows the emotions to bubble to the surface, and then the real conversation starts, right? So if that has to be your focus, just make sure that the window is open to have those conversations when they arise. And my philosophy, though, when it comes to things like transcripts and it comes to attendance plans and attendance assessments and all of those things that someone in their infinite wisdom has decided that we need to do as school districts and school systems and individual schools. For me, my priority is making sure that my students are safe and supported. What I try to tell my school counselors when they're struggling with that, the paper will be there tomorrow. We have to do the work today to ensure that our students are here tomorrow as well. I can do a transcript while I'm sitting watching Stranger Things, or I can do attendance data while I'm sitting by the pool, right? It's not what I want to do, but it's about finding ways to make life and work come together. And it's about finding ways and systems to be efficient, right? My role, what I feel like my role is at the district level is what can I put in place to make your job as a high school counselor, as a middle school counselor, as an elementary counselor, what can I do? What barriers can I remove from you? So those are pieces when we lean into what we learned through ASCA and the ASCA model. What I tell my counselors is, if nothing else, have a program management agreement with your administrator so that when you have to make a decision of, am I going to do transcripts or am I going to support a student who is struggling with their gender identity, which of those takes priority for you as an administrator? Because I can guarantee you, if I neglect this, they won't be here for me to review a transcript with them at some point in the future, right? They'll either be absent or, God forbid, something worse will happen. And sometimes we just have to make difficult choices. And if I'm going to make a difficult choice, it's going to be to the benefit of a child.
I have some questions again from live stream. A short question, where can they find information about implicit bias and the state requirement for this?
I would have to do some research and lean on my colleagues in our diversity and equity department in our district. So I would definitely have to do some research on that.
And then a separate question from another viewer. How does MMPS navigate the conflicting state and federal legislation? It seems like quite the balancing act since we are both state and federally funded.
I will say that that is not my area of expertise. However, as my boss made sure that I reiterated, our district has done our due diligence through the different departments that are involved in these conversations, as well as our legal department, in diving into the state and federal statutes. And we as a district believe that we are operating within all state and federal laws and guidelines regarding this work. I think that's probably all I'm allowed to say on that one.
Okay, because that is a policy and legal area. We do have an expert in the room who may address it in our next session, so we'll keep that in mind for our next session. But there's another question now that's more student-centered and more of a practical question. What wording do you suggest when talking about dress code that habitually is gender specific? For example, what do boys wear for graduation? What do girls wear for graduation? Give us some language on dress code.
Right. You know, I had a conversation with one of my school counselors a couple of years ago. They were a high school that green and white were their colors. Female students were required to wear the white robe. The male students were required to wear the green robe. And when we had a student who identified as transgender, identified as female, born as male, the simple question in that specific scenario was like, what color does the child want to wear? It may not be a big deal for the student in those individual cases, but the child led the conversation and came to an informed decision on what they wanted to do. We have had high schools that have, because of wanting to make sure that it's an inclusive environment, it's one color robe. That's all we got to worry about, all right? Dress code is one of those hot button issues. I know that it was something that popped up at my wife's school last year. I don't necessarily have the answer for that. I think we have to look at things through a lens and start those conversations, right? As a school counselor, are you on your leadership team in the building? Are you a part of the team that focuses on behavior or discipline? Being the voice for those students when you have the opportunity. You know, starting the conversation is often the hardest part, and hopefully as educators who want to do what's right for students, we can come to a unified decision on changing language or changing procedures or changing policy that puts students at a disadvantage.
And we do have another one here, and I'll ask you, you've addressed this somewhat, but we'll ask for you to elaborate on ways that you can support parents of these children, of LGBTQ children, in terms of training, meetings, focus group, language, virtual. Can you expand on how we might support parents?
I mean, I think from directly, counselor to parent, we have to lean into our counseling skills, right? Although we are school counselors and trained to work with children, how many of you have not had the crying teacher in your office and have not had the crying parent in your office, and let's be honest, the crying administrator in your office, right? Just because our expertise is in working with children doesn't mean that we can't use those skill sets to honor an individual's experience. One of my school counselors at the high school, as a high school student, one of his children identified as transgender. And he talked to me specifically, as a parent, I have called my child this name for 16 years. And it is just, like switching to the new name. I want to be supportive. I'm a school counselor. I still screw up and call my child by the wrong name. And being that person to be with them in that moment, and let them know that it's in a journey, being empathetic, honoring their experience just as well as we want to honor their child's experience. Like being mindful of, you have a child that was born and you raised, and their identity now may be drastically different than what they were when they were younger, or your vision of what what your child was going to be and what they would look like as an older child or an adult. Like that, think about that from a parent's perspective on how difficult that could be. So honoring their experience and being with them and walking with them. Then from a more structural standpoint, I think that's when we look to whatever community resources that we have. Organizations like PFLAG, I mentioned the Oasis Center in my presentation. That's a local organization that does a lot of work with this population. They have numerous different types of support groups for students, but they have support groups for parents as well. So trying to connect, similarly to your friend in North Carolina, who tried to connect those parents that are walking through this similarly together, right? Maybe at different points, but they can understand and empathize. Sometimes finding somebody who is experiencing something similar is as empowering as anything else.
When you guys presented all of this to the school board, was there a lot of parent pushback?
You know, I don't recall if there was at the time. You know, sometimes school board meetings can be fascinating, and sometimes school board meetings can be contentious. As an educator, sometimes I choose for my own mental health to disengage from some of those things. I can't say that there was. Nothing comes to mind from memory of any kind of backlash from parents in the community. And I think that goes, we're being mindful of, this is not something this is not a matter of teaching or indoctrination. We are supporting students, right? We are supporting students who identify within this population. And so we want to support and protect them just as well as we want to protect all students. So it's just having our eyes and ears open to provide those services for students that might need a little extra care and understanding. But no, fortunately, I don't remember any backlash from the community.
You know, I'd like to expand a little more on sharing our success stories. And so, briefly, if you're an elementary practitioner, would you stand up in elementary school, early childhood or elementaries? Please stand up. Just want to see who you are. Okay, have a seat, please. If you work with middle school, in school counseling, middle school, please stand.
My people.
Okay. All right, thank you. If you work with high school as a counselor, please stand. Okay, great. So elementary, tell us some of your success stories. Share with us. We still have a little bit of time. We have about 10 minutes. I'd love to hear, what have you done that works to support LGBTQ students? What have you done that works?
So I can actually speak to elementary and to high school because I was a high school counselor for 8 years as well. And one of the things that I got from a breakout session at a conference I went to is just put a rainbow flag, doesn't have to be huge, a small rainbow flag somewhere, somewhat inconspicuous, but a little conspicuous as well. And the ones who need it will notice. And even at an elementary school, I have, a rainbow themed area in my office. And, if anybody asks, I can say, well, I just really like rainbows. And for the ones that are like, but does it mean something? Those are the ones that usually want to know, does it mean this? And, for some of my students who I know are identifying in the community, I say, I've got that over there for a reason. So if you ever need to talk about anything, you can just come talk to me.
It's awesome. We do something similar. The symbol you see up here, like part of the grant is purchasing lanyards, rainbow lanyards, purchasing signs, pins, little things, those little like signals to know that for students to know that you're an ally. That's wonderful.
Well, for Murfreesboro City Schools, the whole child is our focus. And relationship building is something that we spend a lot of time on through our social emotional learning curriculum that we choose. So definitely whenever we go into our classrooms, whether it's training for the teachers or training and lessons for the students, respect for all students. We definitely, with those social emotional learning lessons, we're all different. And many times we don't have to be friends, but we have to work together. And we have to respect one another for the differences that we have. So we, at my school specifically, it's very broad, but specific with respecting all. And we've had students that, have definitely come out and trying to communicate with those parents, and some are supportive and some are just, I don't know. But again, if we use the same language as educators, we respect all. And we're role models for those students as well. So it's kind of broad, but that's how we approach it at my school.
Others in elementary with success stories or successful practices?
For me, it's just using gender inclusive languages. So all of my students are friends, or they're students or kids. They're never boys or girls, or I try to call kids to the restroom just based off of where they are in line, and never like 3 girls here go, that kind of stuff. So that I'm not presuming anything like that. And that tends to be noticed, especially by my older kids, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, especially the 4th and 5th graders as they're exploring who they are. And so that's just an easy practice, and it helps if you forget their names too.
Thank you. Middle school counselors, middle school. This is when puberty sets in, right? So, middle school, let's hear from you.
Similar to what she said regarding her flag, I have just a large sign that's hanging behind on the wall, and it just is the words, "You matter," and it's in, each letter is a different color. And so, no matter what they identify, any student, I want them always to know that they matter, and they're seen and they're heard in this office. And so I've had so many students that will come to me just because of that sign and feel that it's a safe environment where they can disclose and be real.
And I think it's the same type of mentality, or talking about what we've already talked about, and then what you said also about when you're in that space with those students, making sure that they know that they're supported, that you will call them by the name that they want to be called, and that you are there for them and on their side, and that gets around in your building, and so other students start noticing and they realize that you're a safe person to go to.
Middle schoolers are not great at keeping secrets, that's for sure. And that's a good secret to share, for sure.
High school, talk to us. If you work with high schoolers.
So a few years ago, I was wanting to run a group, and I asked my admin for buy-in, and my admin was completely on board. And he was really nervous that our big CEO wasn't going to be so supportive of a open group. And so I asked, how should we title the group? And me and the counseling team got together with admin, and we kind of brainstormed on different language that would attract certain populations. And so we decided to call it SSG, which was Social Support Group. Very simple, but I had one student that came to me and was like, "What is this SSG group?" And I said, "It is just a support group for students who are having social struggles." And then they kind of leaned in a little bit and said, "Is this for transgender students?" And I said it could be for any student, but yes, we want transgender students to come and feel that they are heard and seen, and we want to share their stories and their experiences and address that in more of a coping skills way. So when that one student got that information, then it quickly spread. And within a couple days, maybe a week, that group went from like one consent form to maybe 20. And we actually had so many students interested that we had to break up the group into 2 different sessions because we wanted to cap it at 12. So that was kind of how we titled that. And we didn't get any pushback from our district office staff, which was great because we were very nervous that was going to get projected to families. And then when parents, kind of reached out with their consent forms or had any questions and they reached out via email, we just kept it the same. We had the same blanket statement for students, for parents, for admin, for district office. And so students knew, but it wasn't something that the community was very aware of. And right when they walked in, there was a rainbow flag, and some students were very uncomfortable. And we addressed that with them. We put them in our office privately, or we asked them to come back at lunch, and we talked to them about that. And they said, well, I want a group, not that. And we said, well, then that's fine. We respect where you're at with that, but this is a very open, inclusive group. And so we will be running a different group next semester that might be more geared towards what you're looking for. And so we were able to kind of approach it that way. And we never had any big issue or backlash or anything, which we were all very nervous about. So,
at our high school, the graduation piece made me think about this. I was pleased that our graduation coordinator for dress code, even though our gowns are all the same color, allowed females to wear pants at graduation, because under the gown, dress code is also a factor. So that was, I appreciated that, and I think that's important, like you mentioned, if school counselors can be on those teams and in those meetings when those decisions are made. I'll continue to advocate for my students, because we do in my school like to still divide students by boys and girls, but that's something I'll champion this year. But a success story I had with a student, a freshman, who was beginning to explore their gender and come out to their peers as a different gender this year. And I met with this student, and I respected them, and I called them what they wanted to be called. And then at registration, we had them sign their names according, that they had met with us to choose their classes, and then their parents also had to sign it and return it. And I said, please sign. And they signed their birth name because their parents weren't aware. And we I looked and I reassured them that I understood why they were doing that. And it was like a good moment between us, and it was just a very respectful exchange, I felt like, and they were appreciative of that.
This is great. Dr. Gordon, are there any closing remarks you want to make?
Just know that I love and respect all of you as school counselors. You're doing the hard work every single day. It's always wonderful to see new students who are coming through the program. If you're ever interested in placement in Metro schools, just ask Dr. Wilson, and I will do my level best to find the right spot. And if you're ever looking for a job, shoot me an email. So I just appreciate being invited today. Like I said, I'm not the expert. We're all walking this journey together, and that's why we're here to support each other. So good luck, and we'll be hitting the ground running here in a couple of weeks with school. So good luck with that as well.
Thank you, Dr. Gordon.